So unfortunately, I pulled a rookie move and forgot to plug in the microphone, ruining pretty much all of the clips.
How's it going, everybody? Hope you're all doing well.
But rather than scrapping the entire video, I figured I would just do a little bit of a voiceover for you. So I left Colorado the day prior to some pretty sketchy, snowy conditions. It's usually about a 4-hour drive for me, but because of all of the snow, it ended up being around 6 hours. But by the time I made it to Utah, all that snow had disappeared. It was kind of a Colorado storm, and in Utah was just a bunch of stormy, overcast, kind of raining conditions. So I got some cool stormy shots the day prior, but wasn't too sure what to expect about sunrise, but I decided to give it a shot anyways. I had been to this area before earlier in the year, which at the time was just a classic kind of desert scene. So arriving to this completely snowed out scene was a complete surprise to me, something that I was not expecting. So I guess through the night, the rain had ended up turning into snow, which was an absolute pleasant surprise. So I was super excited, and just kind of spent most of the early part of this morning just walking around and just trying to find some compositions in the area. So I photographed this valley kind of just up in these hills behind me before, looking out on the scene here. But I think I want to kind of actually go in a bit more this way down the valley. So we're crossing this cool old creek bed, and this whole area is like an equestrian area for horses. So I can stay on these like horse trails and or all these washes, and it'll be good. But yeah, it's a bit risky because I've never been this way, but sometimes that's what you got to do, is just kind of explore. And I like to think that the universe will reward exploration. Of course, not always, but in the worst case, at least you're scouting an area. If it just goes to shit, you at least know not to go this way next time. But yeah, just stunning. At the birds, what a great morning. So yeah, I'm gonna keep scouting around, and I'll come back to you when I find something. So I remember being dead set on trying to find some sort of a rock to put in the foreground. I don't know why, but I guess that's just what felt right to me at the time. But because of the fresh blanketing of snow, that kind of covered everything. And really the only thing to shoot was these desert shrubs that kind of peppered the landscape. So I ended up finding a little scene that I liked. There was just one large shrub and some smaller ones that I felt like all kind of led up to the rock spire in the distance. It wasn't anything fancy. Again, I wasn't expecting much out of the light, but there was this kind of opening of clouds behind the rock that really also helped it stand out against the clouds, if you will, just a bit of contrast. And I really do like how the image turned out. So I explored up the valley just a little bit more, but wasn't able to find anything of much interest. So I turned around and traversed a couple hills, and I finally stumbled across a rock. So I was very excited about that. I think the only real reason I was looking for a rock was to be able to balance out the visual weight of the image. The large rock spire, the main subject, if you will, just held way too much visual weight against the rest of the image. So being able to find this rock allowed me to balance that out, and add some more weight into the foreground, just kind of as an anchor. And I think it does a pretty good job at that. So I just stuck around, just waiting to see what would happen. And eventually the clouds kind of opened up a little bit, and we got some pretty cool, interesting patterns in the clouds. So pretty happy with how the scene turned out. So I figured we could jump into Lightroom and Photoshop and edit this image together. All right, so we are here in Lightroom, as you can see. I'll open up this window real quick just to show you that we have 3 images. They are all the same. Nothing really changes between them at all. It is just a simple focus stack, not because there is depth of field issues necessarily. At f11, there would not have really been a problem getting this all in focus, but sometimes I just like to get perfect focus from front to back, so that's the only reason we have that. So we're going to do just the main edit on this one image, and then we can copy and paste it over to the other 2, at which point we will bring it into Photoshop, do the focus stack, and then we'll continue the edit in Photoshop, which is usually where I just do the final tweaks. A lot of the heavy lifting happens here in Lightroom, but just so you know, we have the 3 images, but we're going to work on just the one here. So looking at this image, the first thing you can tell, and that's not just only with this image, but I find this a lot with snow images, is that obviously snow picks up the ambient color of the scene. So we have a pretty cold blue snow color palette here. So personally, I like the snow to be as close to white as possible. Just a little bit of blue tones, of course. You want that cold feeling. But I do think we need to be careful with moving the global temperature. I find you get some weird results, especially if, we have these red rocks, and there's also a little bit of warmth in these clouds here. So we are going to move it a bit just to find a more neutral point, but we'll probably do some kind of local adjustments and dual processing just to get the snow how we want it, separate from the rest of the colors and things in the image. So temperature and kind of color is the first thing I'm thinking for this photo, and then 2, of course, just a decent exposure. There's not too much to do. It's not really a high dynamic range scene, but just maybe bringing out a little bit of detail in the shadows, adding some pop and contrast into the kind of landscape here, and then we'll probably edit that last shot since it was focused on infinity. Not that it matters, but we'll edit that last shot to get as much drama and contrast in the sky as possible, and then in Photoshop we can also bring that kind of in the sky in there. So that's the game plan. So I think we can just start with moving the global temperature slider around just a little bit, just to find a more neutral spot. As you can see, if you go too much, then it's just weird, especially because there's some browns in this desert foliage. So just enough to where we kind of neutralize everything. I don't want to go too much, something like that. We've gotten rid of some of the blue, but I'm not affecting some of that brown and yellow within the desert foliage. But I did notice as we did that, I liked how the sky looked originally. I liked that bluish kind of a tone. And then I would assume if we crank the contrast, we get too much, but we get that pop in the sky, but you could always bring saturation down. So that's kind of what I'm talking about. Global temperature with snow stuff is tricky. But again, we're going to edit that sky separately, so we can just do this for now. I think that's good. It's more flat. It's kind of closer to how I saw it. I didn't necessarily see this blue scene, so that's a good starting point. I do want to push my histogram over just a little bit more. Nothing crazy, but just get a little bit more balance out of it. Contrast. Obviously, a good rule of thumb is just kind of go back and forth with some of these sliders until you find a good sweet spot. I think that's good. Highlights. There's obviously not a lot of highlight in this image. I wouldn't want to recover too much, then it's going to be too flat. But just kind of moving it around, dropping it a bit just to get some detail out. Same with the shadows. I wanted to bring some detail out. Not too much, although we're going to add a lot of contrast probably in Photoshop, so that might block up the shadows. So I don't know. That's good for now. white, I saw a trick recently I actually did want to try. I believe if you press shift and double click, it will set a white point for you. Oh wow, there you go. And then same with the blacks, you'll set your black point. I don't like the way that looks. I just wanted to try that. Cool little tip, I guess. I'm probably going to bring the whites down a bit and the blacks up just a bit. And then if I do a before and after, you can already see we just balanced the image out, balanced the temperature out a bit, and then balanced the exposure out a bit as well. So I like to also at this point add a little boost in color just to see what I'm working with. Really nice tones in the rock there that I'm gonna want to bring out. But let's see, something like that's good. I really don't like to touch my saturation knob ever. I just don't really like the way it looks, but I usually do that kind of with global adjustments anyways. But yeah, we can make our way down here. Let's see if we bring down the blue. So something like that, that's kind of how I'm gonna want my landscape to look. Like I said, personally, my personal taste, I do like when the snow is white, but as you can see, we lost blue in the sky, which I think it works in the sky, and that's where you'll get your cold feeling from. So you can kind of keep the cold feeling, but then, I don't know, I just like the way that a white snow looks. So I think that's good. Move down. Here for the sharpening amount, I like to do double my megapixel. So I'm 24 megapixel, so 48. And then Alt on Mac, not sure what it is on PC, but if you click Alt and then click and hold this mask and I bring it in, you can see what it's doing. And I want to find a point to where I'm kind of just sharpening only the details of the image. I don't want to go all the way, because I'll get some weird haloing, but just bringing it in. It's going to prevent sharpening some of the noise. It's not perfect, but just a little bit. And then if I zoom into the sky here, looking for noise, I actually don't have too much noise in this image, but we'll probably just do a little bit of denoise. Not too much, but just a little bit. Doesn't hurt if you're careful with it. Chromatic aberrations, good to click that. And then coming down to this camera calibration here. This is something that I love to do personally, which is increase the saturation of the blue primary. You will get some negative effects, but I find that it globally just makes the image nicer. You get a bit of contrast pop out of it. But we will obviously probably see some blues resurface, so then we can go back and adjust it. But if I just bring this up, I mean, that's all the way. It's very subtle. I don't know why. I've always just liked what it does. If I turn that off and on, it just brings in some little bit of contrast, but we got more blue. So I'm going to go back, bring even more blue out, something like that. And then what I might want to do is bring out some saturation of this rock. If I click this little icon here and hover over it, it'll kind of tell me what colors. You can see here they're lighting up what colors they are within the image. So it's actually kind of some purples and magentas. If I bring that up too much, it looks funky. Let's see, just a bit, nothing crazy, just to add some contrast. I'm curious if we shift the hue of them a bit. It's very interesting. There is some within the sky as well. So actually I'm probably not gonna want to do that. Although in the magenta here, that seems to be just in the rock. So maybe we can just perfect it a little bit more. It's nothing really crazy, but yeah, let's do a little before and after here. So before, raw image, after, before, after. It's a pretty simple image. Yeah, honestly, I mean, I'm really liking the landscape already. The sky, we lost all of the punch out of the sky. But like I said, we're going to edit that separately. The only other thing is we can maybe add some detail into the landscape here. Just using a linear gradient. And then let's just try some clarity. That's way too much, but something like that. I don't want too much contrast, but yeah, I like that. It helps add a little bit more depth to the image. Obviously, what's closer to you, what's closer to the camera, it's going to have a bit more detail. And right now it's all kind of flat. And kind of like I was saying, the visual weight, this is super strong tonally. When I bring in this, we just gain a little bit more tone here. Kind of helps balance that out. But I'm going to want to bring up the shadows a little bit more now, I think. And something like that, I think, is good. So what we can do, I'm going to open up this window again. If I right click on the image I just edited, go over to develop settings, click copy settings, and then check all and click copy. I can now paste this to both of these images. Go back to develop settings and press paste settings. That'll now move that edit over to the other images so that they are all the same. And then once this loads, I can now hit shift, click and hold shift, click all of the images. I'm going to right click and edit in Photoshop as layers. And that's going to prompt Photoshop to open, and that's just going to automatically open the 3 images into Photoshop. Alright, so we now have our images in Photoshop. What I did was imported the last frame as a smart object, so we can open it in Camera Raw and edit the sky. But if I just turn that layer off, there is the foreground focus, midground focus, and back focus. What I'm probably going to do first, though, is shift click all of them so we can highlight all of them. Come up here to edit and do an auto align. I have a window that popped up here. I always just leave it on auto and press OK. On a very simple scene like this, there's going to be no issues. At least there shouldn't be. And all that's going to do is, there was probably some microscopic movement. Even though I'm on a tripod, there was probably some movement. You know, I'm on the snow. So it's just going to make sure that there's no movement, and if there was potentially focus breathing from the lens, which my lens unfortunately does have a little bit of focus breathing, it's just going to align the image up so that they're all exactly the same. And then we can do a focus stack as well. Pull this window up here, you can see what's happening. Alright, it is now done auto aligning. I like to just go through and check that nothing weird has happened. So it looks good. So I'm going to turn off this first layer because that is the cloud layer, and we will do that later. But these 3 are just the base layers of the image. So I've shift clicked it to highlight all 3. Now we can go edit, auto blend layers, and it's going to pop up this window here. You want to do stack images, seamless tones and colors, press OK, and then just let this finish loading, and we should have a focus stack that will check to make sure it's done a good job. Alright, it has finished focus stacking, and you can see it's essentially made masks, and it's chosen the sharpest pixels out of each of the images and combine them into one. I like to grab the little eyeglass zoom in tool here and just zoom in and just kind of make sure that there's no weird artifacts or anything like that, which on a still image like this, there shouldn't be any issues. So it looks good to me. And again, we're nice and sharp in the front and then all the way to the back as well. So again, this step was not necessary. It's just something that I personally like to do. But as you can see through all of the auto aligning, it's pretty common that you just get this weird edge because it had to shift things around to line them up. So what we will do is crop in. So I'll zoom in so I can see this edge here. Go to the crop tool. Make sure I'm on original ratio. And if I just click and drag this in, give it a sec. I'm just going to bring this edge. I don't like to go straight to the edge because I also find sometimes you'll get this weird blurry out of focus couple of pixels. So I just want to come in just a little bit more than the edge. And then I'm going to scroll all the way up. Keep going. And then do the same for this part. And then I can just click and drag this because it'll take a minute. All the way over to the other edge of the image. And then I'm going to want to do the same thing. Just bring it in a little bit. And then lastly, come all the way down to the bottom. And just bring it in a little bit as well. And I'll press enter. We'll let that load. And then we'll go back and just kind of zoom out and go fit to screen. And we've gotten rid of those edges, and it was, we were only going in just a couple of pixels at a time. So we really didn't change the composition much. It wasn't a big crop. So next what I like to do is, again, shift click, and then I right click. And on Mac here, it's shift alt. I guess I have a PC keyboard, but shift alt Windows, I guess is what I'm doing. And then click merge visible. I guess Mac, it'll be shift alt command, I assume. And what it does is it creates a new merge visible. If we do not do that keyboard shortcut, it will just create only this, and it will delete those. So I like to keep those just in case I need to go back. But this one layer is essentially the combined focus stack. So the next step that I like to do is to clean the image up, any dust spots or any distracting items. Just simplify it as much as possible. Sometimes I go heavy-handed here, sometimes I don't. But essentially, one thing we can do is just zoom out to where it's quite small and let our eyes look at the entire image and ask ourselves if there's anything that our eyes are going to that they shouldn't. For me, one of which is this spot here. There's a couple here. I want my eyes to be, here. This is the main area of the image for me. And I find that there's some distracting bits on the edges here. So we are probably going to zoom into them. Grab the spot healing brush here. I'm going to use my bracket keys to increase the size. And I should be able to just paint over the area here. And it usually does a pretty good job. Let's do that one more time. I think that's okay. Again, we'll do this spot, and that spot, maybe here. And this is what I'm saying. Sometimes I go a little heavy-handed, get carried away, but and I just want to make sure that I don't see anything that's too funky, any weird funky results. But I think it's done a good job. And then maybe over here, this spot, do the same thing. And that looks good. And then I think there was one over here. I'd like to try to get this one as well. I might be a little bit more precise with this one. And that looks good. And the nice part about having this merge layer that we just did all of the cleanup on is when we turn it off, you can see a before and after. So it's just kind of cleaned up some distractions, and it's a little bit more simple now. So I like the way that that looks, and then just make sure that there's nothing else, nothing funky. So that looks good to me. And then we are going to clean up this dust spot, although it's kind of a waste of time because we're going to end up editing the cloud layer anyways, then repasting it, and then we'll have to clean it, but I'm just going to do it anyways, just so I don't forget. But I can just kind of select that area there, and looks like it's done a good job. That was the obvious dust spot. If you want to try to find some less obvious ones, what we can do is click this icon here and go up to brightness and contrast. That's going to add like a brightness and contrast effect above the image here. And if we just crank the contrast up, I might bring the brightness down a bit and then duplicate it, potentially even a couple times. It looks hideous, but it has revealed another dust spot there. There's one there. Just kind of scanning with our eyes. I think just those for the most part. So leaving these active, I can click and come down to the layer that we're working on, and I'll be able to fix them and just make sure that it's done a good job. And then there was one up here, and I thought there was another. There seems to be, there's some, but when you've added this much contrast and you can still barely see them, they're not really going to be within your final image. And we're probably going to have to do these adjustments on the cloud layer anyways, but that looks good. So we can now delete those and give your eye a second to adjust, because even though it looked hideous, the human eye loves contrast. In the audio world, when you A/B something and one is just a little bit louder, and that is the only difference, people tend to like the louder one as well. And it's a similar thing. I think your eyes, just for a little bit, really like that level of contrast. So you want to just let your eyes relax, get used to the image again, and we can now move forward. So the next thing I think I'm going to do is work on that sky. So if I click and select it, and because it's a smart object, I can now double click in here and it will open up Camera Raw, which is pretty much just Lightroom. It's the exact same thing. Oops, I have not updated, I assume, or I just updated automatically. If you remember, I did not necessarily like the global temperature adjustment that happened. So we're going to go back to the raw global setting there, which I just double clicked is all I did there. And first thing I'm going to do is probably just try to bring in some dehaze. I find that that does a good job at bringing a lot of detail out of the clouds, which, as you can see, it just did. Clarity, I want to be careful. I'm just kind of seeing what it's doing. I think a little bit of clarity is good. So I like that. We can come back up here, maybe some contrast, highlights down, and it's just a lot of tweaking. I want to be careful that there's no haloing happening around the edges here. I think we're okay for now. We might actually want to bring some warmth back in. Let's just see what that does. So it looks a little bit funky. So I'm curious. I'm going to set that back to its default. If we go to the color mixer here and click that icon, I want to see what colors are in here. It's funny enough, even though it looks like they're warmer colors, there really isn't any warm in those highlights. So I'm curious if we can inject some warmth by going to color grading. Come over here to highlights. We're going to exaggerate a bit at first just to find the right tone. I don't want it to be too green, just kind of a little bit yellow. And then bring that all the way down and just bring it up a touch, luminance a bit. And then it's always a good idea to do before and after. I don't love it. It gives too much of a green tint to the image. I don't know. I'm going to turn it off. We can probably do some luminosity mask work and actually paint in some color, so we're probably going to do that. So do it before and after. Before, after. You can see how much detail we pulled out of the sky. Let's see. I don't want it to be too dark. I don't want it to be too bright. I might keep it at 0. A lot of this is just trial and error. I'm just moving sliders around until I get a good result. The shadow slider doesn't do too much to the sky, but because of that, it might be a good idea to bring it all the way up, just so when we do the selection of the sky and bring the sky in, we don't get some weird haloing where this edit meets the other edit. So that'll be good. And I don't know if I want more pop or not. Go back on that. Let's come back to these effects one last time. Yeah, because that's too much. That little bit of clarity is nice. I think we're just going to go with that. One last thing we can do is to add some more noise reduction, although we might actually do that with another one of Photoshop's effects. So we're going to press OK and just run with this and let this load in. All right, so it has now loaded in. So what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to turn it off and then come back down to the merge visible that we created. I'm going to come up here to select. And on an image like this, I think it is just easier to do select sky. And through the updates, I've found that this has gotten pretty accurate. So we'll see how well it does, and if it's good enough, we'll roll with it. All right, so it has loaded in the selection, and I can tell that it is not perfect. If I zoom in, there's some weird things here, which that'll be okay. But the patches that it didn't load in, I'm going to want to fix. It looks like over here, yeah, it just didn't really get this part at all either. And then over here, we'll make sure that the rock is important. The rock's edge is good, but then there's a couple of the spots of snow that it thinks that the tonality of the snow is the sky, so we'll fix that a bit. And it's missed that. So it honestly hasn't done a great job, unfortunately, but we can fix that. I'm just going to grab the polygon tool here, the lasso tool, and I'm just going to make sure I'm on the right mode. I want to subtract from the selection, so I'm on subtract, and then I might do a pixel feather of 1 just to forgive my human error here a little bit, but I'm just going to manually just kind of come over this ridge line here and just kind of fix the selection. Trying to be as careful as I can. Thankfully, this is quite an easy image. Some are more complicated, I think you could imagine, but just going to come back around, link it, and then it should erase all of that weird funkiness. And then we want to do add to selection for these areas that it just missed entirely. So just make sure that it's gotten those areas. That'll be okay. And this is kind of why I mentioned bringing the shadows all the way up, is just to make that transition look a little bit nicer. So I'm gonna come in here. I feel comfortable enough knowing that I don't have to be perfect, again, just because this is such a simple image. I'm not too worried about it. There's a little bit there, but for the sake of this video, I'm not being too picky, but that's something that you'll want to choose for your own images. I might personally, if I was actually doing this, spend a little bit more time here, but I don't want to take up too much time. So for these areas, we're doing the subtract. So I'm just subtracting here. We might want to do a little bit more broad selections here, just so we can get all of this. Just being a little bit lazy right now, but that looks good. These here. And I'll probably fast forward through this part. Even though I'm trying to be fast, it'll be easier if I just fast forward. All right, we are pretty much done. It's not perfect, but hopefully that one pixel feather will help, and there's some things we can do if it's not perfect, but it'll do for now. So because we have this selection now, if I come up here and press this mask icon on the cloud edit, it will create a mask based off of that selection. And if we click on, it will paste in the sky. So we have some very interesting things going on here. We can fix those, and then obviously it's way too blue, but I think I like the exposure of it. So first things first, we need to fix these areas. So I'm going to press B for brush, bracket down to the right size. I'm gonna want to lower my opacity, make sure I have a soft brush. Oops, let's undo that. And we're going to want to paint with white, which is going to reveal. And if I just bring this in, you can see it's kind of fixing these mistakes. So we're just going to kind of brush this in. Another thing you can do is with even lower opacity setting, go over the entire edge of the ridgeline. That's just going to kind of feather it a little bit, and then we'll actually do the same thing but with black on the other side. And just by feathering in on both sides, it's just going to blend the image a little bit better. This is always a bit of a hit or miss process. Sometimes Photoshop just does absolutely fantastic right off the bat. Other times you got to kind of coax it a bit, but it's okay. Just checking it out, making sure there's no other funky areas, and then I know we had some over here. So gonna work on this. We're going to check over here. And so it looks good. And so all I'm going to do now is reverse it to black. And then rather than painting on the sky side, I'm just going to paint on the ridge side. And be really careful here. You can create a weird, as you can see, you can create too much of a glow on the edge here. So rather than sticking to the edge, if I come off the edge just a bit, I'm just going to let the natural feather of this brush do it, and it's going to be less of a noticeable effect there. So just being careful, going all the way around. I don't always do this, I think, just for this image. I just want to make sure that we have a nice edge. And the more we refine this mask, the more these next couple of steps are going to work in our favor. One of which is like bringing the saturation down of the sky. We can just copy this mask straight over to a saturation layer and it will be good. So definitely let a lot of blue in here. And I think we actually need to go back over this area. And when we get rid of some of this blue, actually, it'll also help it blend a little bit better. So I'm going to go back to white. There were some areas I want to fix a bit. Maybe that's just the clouds. It looks kind of funky, but yeah. So zoom out. So we should have a decent blend now. I just want to take care of the color in the sky there. So I can create a new vibrance layer. And if I click Alt, hold Alt, and then click and drag this mask up to the vibrance layer, it will ask if we want to replace this vibrance mask. And we're going to say yes. And you can see it's now just added that effect just kind of over the exact same mask. So as you can see, like if I crank this, it's affecting still just the sky. But we're going to use our arrow keys just to be a little bit more precise. But if you press Shift, you can go in increments of 10. So I mean, if I go, that's black and white. Obviously, that looks funky. But if I start bringing it in, around here is good. I think if we turn this off and on, it's good. We might even, I feel like we can go with 30. We'll go with 30 for now. Again, whenever you edit your own images, just take the time to do all of that, but I don't want to have you sitting here forever. So another thing that I like to do, and I should mention we have to go back and get those dust spots, but I'm going to add a brightness and contrast at the very top just to see if I am able to, if any of these changes look good globally now. Contrast is pretty good. I can open up my histogram here. I'm wondering if we'll want to go brighter. Just a little bit might be nice. But then I'm a little bit too bright there, but I think that's nice. We definitely need to add just a little bit more brightness. So now, in order to fix these dust spots, I can rasterize this smart object layer by pressing right-clicking, excuse me, and doing rasterize layer, or because I don't want to be, I try not to have a destructive workflow. Again, I'm going to click and hold Shift, then click the bottom, so I've highlighted all the layers, right-click, and then Shift, Command Alt, click Merge Layer, and that will create a new Merge Visible on top, and we can move forward from there. So I'm going to go over here and fix that dust spot. Zoom out. Now that I know where it is, I feel like I can just see it. So we'll fix that. And then there's one here. And one here. And that's good. So another thing I'm going to do is press Command J, and that's going to duplicate this layer. And what I am going to do is come up to Filter, Noise, and go to Reduce Noise. And this is just some noise reduction. You could have done this in Lightroom or on the edit of the sky, and when we pasted it in, it would have just been there. But if I bring this window up, I am just doing some noise reduction, which honestly there surprisingly isn't too much noise in this image. But just to get a real smooth sky. Something like that. I'm going to press OK. And this tends to take a while to load, so we're just going to let it go. Alright, it has finished loading. So what we can do is, again, if you press and hold Alt and click that same sky mask up to this layer, we are essentially just adding denoise to the sky without affecting the landscape. And we can check that edge just because you can definitely see the noise here go away. And the better your selection is on the edge, the more you shouldn't have to worry about it softening the landscape. It actually can get rid of some haloing, so that's nice. So I think that's good. So the next step, the next thing that I like to think about is dodging and burning. This image, I don't think needs a lot of dodging and or burning in the foreground. Maybe we'll add some. I could possibly bring out some detail in the rock here. So let's go ahead and do that. And honestly, yeah, we do not need to do any burning. So I'm actually just going to get rid of that. So unfortunately, that was a waste of time. But we might want to do some burning. Specifically, I think, on the details of this image. It kind of just helps bring them out. So I'm going to go pure black for the burning process. And I'm going to go up here. And I'm essentially going to exaggerate the lines and areas of high contrast in the image. Again, this has to be on overlay. You can go quite high as well. It's going to be a similar thing. It's going to look ridiculous, but this should be better. So again, I'm trying to exaggerate the lines I already see. There's something right there. And the more you do this, the more you know what it is that you're looking for. Make sure to adjust the size of your brush as you go. And the edges of things is nice. And I'll probably fast forward this part. Alright, so now that it looks like a kindergartner drew all over your image, we can bring the opacity all the way down, and like we've said before, let your eyes adjust. And I'm going to start bringing that back in. One thing to mention, certain areas might start looking overdone faster than others. We can always create a mask and paint them out. So I already know that this is probably going to look a little bit funnier sooner than the rock here. So I'm paying attention to the rock right now, but just bringing that in. That's too much. Come down. 40% is good. And again, so now this looks funny. So if I add a mask, the whole mask defaults to white because white shows. So I'm going to go to black, and I want to lower my opacity, so I'm like slowly erasing. I'm just going to taper that in. This area. And we zoom out. Do a little before and after. I actually want to come down a little bit. We'll go to 30. I want to make sure you can't see these lines necessarily. Obviously, when we do a before and after a bunch really fast, you can see it somewhat, but if I really just kind of let my eyes not really focus in, I can't tell if the effect is there too much, so I think that's a good amount. It just kind of helps add definition. It's kind of like a form of contrast, so I'm happy with that. Although I might want to come in here a little bit more. I think that's good. Cool. And the next thing I like to do is a vignette, but I personally like to manually add in a manually hand-drawn vignette. So we're going to add a brightness and contrast adjustment, bring the brightness all the way down and the contrast all the way up, and then clicking the mask, I'm going to do Command I to invert it so it is now black, so it's not showing that effect at all. And we can grab our brush tool and paint in with white to bring the effect in. But I like to be at like 20%, I'd say. And you definitely want a 0% hardness just so we get that nice feather. And then I zoom out and make my brush nice and big. And I'm going to start just doing circles around the image. So at first I'm just trying to bring a vignette in, but because of the opacity, we can start to layer it in. And once I see it coming in, I can have a bit more control of where I want it. So for example, like I want to darken this snow corner, but I don't want to darken this too much. So you just have to play with this a bunch and you'll figure it out for yourself. But just going to start painting in the vignette. Just trying to focus in on what it's doing. Trying to avoid that bush there a little bit. Just paying attention. We are going to go way more extreme than we should, just so we can see exactly what it is that we're painting in, and then we will then bring the opacity down. What I'm going to do now is focus on the corners of the image and get them how I want it. Again, trying not to affect certain areas too much, but all we're doing is helping assist the visual flow of the image. I obviously want your eye to end up there at the rock. So by darkening these areas, we're kind of telling the eye to not focus here and focus elsewhere. So that's looking good. What we can do also is, since we're painting with white to add the effect, if I switch to black, we can now remove the effect from areas that we don't want it. So for one, I'm just going to kind of make sure that this rock that I was so adamant on capturing doesn't get too much of the effect. And then I can kind of gently make sure that this doesn't get any either. And we are then going to do it again and just really darken up those edges. Again, Command I to invert, brush, paint with white, and just really get the edges of this image dark. I can probably bring it on the sky a little bit more. And so that's the benefit of doing it by hand, where a vignette is a perfect ovular, that's a word, ovular, I don't know, shape. We had the ability to bring that down just a bit more by hand, so that's why I like this method. Also, where I don't want it to creep in too much on this right side, on the left side we can bring it in a little bit more. And so something like that. I am going to do the same thing with that rock. I just want to make sure. Like that. And so what we can do is shift click both of those adjustments and we can just group them. I just do Command G and that creates the group. And like we've done so many times already now, bring it to 0. Let your eyes adjust and start to bring that effect in until you think it fits. I think something like that is nice. So if I can do some before and after, you see it's not affecting the spire here at all. It's just kind of around the edges. And if I do it before and after, I think your eye definitely just leads to this point a little bit more. You could also do the opposite. Now that we've done that, you can increase the brightness. Now this is going to be overkill. And my computer's freaking out. There we go. Invert the mask and then gently paint a brighter area here on the pinnacle. And again, we're going a little overboard here just so we can see what it's doing. Bring it down to 0 and bring it up a bit. If I now press both of these, group those as well, and I do a before and after, you should really see how drastically it brings your eye straight to that rock. I feel like before my eye's kind of all over the place now, but that really helps hone you in on where you want the viewer's eye to go. And then lastly, I do want to bring up the global brightness, I think, just a bit. I think that's too much. Just that 10 is good. And I like that. It was obviously a cold, soft morning, you know, so we're not dealing with any harsh light here. So this image is naturally going to be just quite soft and, you know, but I wanted to bring out some of the drama. So I am quite happy with that. I think the last thing we're going to do is to sharpen the image. So I'm going to create the final merge visible and then duplicate it one more time. And now that I'm on that duplicate, I can go to filter, other, and high pass. You will want to play with this. I personally find that I like 1 the most. The higher up you go, the more intense the effect becomes. But I like 1, and you can of course do web sharpening, or for social media you can sharpen much more than you would for print, or just the image in general, but I like 1, so I'm going to press OK. And if you are new to a high pass filter, it essentially, if I'm zooming in now, is finding pretty much contrast. It's finding where edges meet. So if I go up to like the sky here, you know, you can see where the rock and the sky meet. It's a funky looking mask effect thing. But if I change its blending mode to vivid light, it now looks like normal. And from a distance, if I turn it on and off, depends on how strong your sharpening is, you shouldn't be able to tell that much is happening. But if I zoom in now, that's with sharpening on. If I turn this off, before, after, before, after. It's just my preferred method of sharpening. The only thing you want to make sure sometimes that the haloing doesn't get too bad, which it is. One way we can potentially combat that is, let's drag one of these masks that we made earlier for the sky onto it, and we will need to flip it because white is revealing the effects. Right now it's only sharpening the sky. So if we command I to invert, it's now only here on the landscape. And because that mask wasn't perfect, it is actually doing a pretty good job, although not perfect. What we can do is command click the mask. That's going to select it. I can then go up to select, modify, and I want to contract it by, let's say, 3 pixels. Press OK. I'm actually going to invert the selection. So even though the mask is correct now, I've now inverted the selection to where the sky is selected. I want to go brush and choose black. And essentially, we can get rid of, we're kind of feathering it in a bit to get rid of any haloing. Come over to this side, and we're on a low opacity too, so it's also going to have a more gentle effect. And if I press Command D, that's going to turn off the selection, and that should have gotten rid of the halo for the most part. So I think for the most part that does it. Pretty happy with how it looks. It's kind of what I saw in person. Like I said, that's kind of how I approach snow images. It's naturally going to be quite cold, and I feel like we were able to keep that cold feel for the most part, but I like to try to get a little bit more neutral, and it was just such a soft morning. I wanted to add a little bit more pop and drama, so yeah, I'm pretty happy with the result. I'd love to hear what you think in the comments. Maybe you like the image I captured earlier that morning. Let me know below. And thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.